morning. So my name is Sean Flynn, and I am an American, but I'm down here because I've been spending many, many years in South Africa. I started coming down here in 1998, I guess, and I clerked for Justice Chaskalson on the Supreme Court, and I've been doing research with various copyright holders, stakeholders here in South Africa for the past about 10 years, especially with documentary filmmakers. And we've been trying to help those various constituencies understand their rights under current South African law, especially in dealing with the quotation right, which, as Denise mentioned, is a very open textured fair use-like quotation right that's very useful to the creative communities. And potentially how South Africa could benefit from adopting a US-style fair use right. So I want to address a couple things. So first, what is fair use? And why is it different than fair dealing? And second, what does the research tell us about why that might be useful? And I'm going to try. So this is the US Fair Use Clause. It's been replicated in a bunch of different countries around the world, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Singapore, Taiwan, Israel, Malaysia, Korea, often with slightly different changes in wording. But all of those countries that I just mentioned have what we call an open general exception. And so the magic words in the fair use clause is not actually the words fair use. The words fair dealing and fair use mean exactly the same thing. They mean that the exception is applicable to all the different kinds of rights that we have given the right holder. So Mashendri mentioned, rights of display and rights of performance and rights of communication and rights of reproduction. We add to that list over time. It used to be that it was just one right, just the right of reproduction. So if you only had a reproduction exception, then it would only apply to that. So both fair use and fair dealing are general and open in that sense, and so it doesn't matter which term you use. If you like fair dealing better, use that. The magic words in the fair use clause are such as, because that opens the list. If you don't have such as, then you can only use that general exception for the purposes that are listed. Criticism and review and education, etc. And why is that a problem? The problem is because we now live in a digital age in which much of our interactions take place over the internet, where every single word is subject to copyright. So if you want to reproduce an item on the internet, not to compete with the copyright holder, but rather to index it, rather to use machine learning technology to do data mining or text mining for research purposes, in order to create translation technology, which uses machines to read, and when machines read, they copy the internet in order to learn languages. All of those things reproduce copyrighted material. And if your general exception only applies to criticism and review and research, then you have not authorized the internet. So the magic of US fair use is that by creating an open textured general exception in 1978, which we have never changed, it was flexible enough to authorize all the things that came later. Plagiarism detection, internet search, thumbnails, all of these things. So why does the United States have the world's largest entertainment and publishing industries, but also the world's largest technology industries? And a big piece of that is fair use. It's not the only piece of enabling environment in these areas, but it's a key piece. And Hollywood entertainment industries use fair use because they too want to use the latest technologies in order to create the latest entertainment offerings, right? Oh, sorry. Oh, I need to go back. Okay, stop there. So who's doing that? So I mentioned that fair use does come from the United States. It comes from the 1978 United States Copyright Act. But I mentioned a whole bunch of other places that have been replicating it. But more importantly, there's a general trend towards such as, towards openness within copyright limitations and exceptions. And that openness is what's key for the modern environment. And by openness, we mean open to purpose, open to works, and open to the user. That there should be user rights that apply to any kind of work, to any kind of right within the work, and to any user that does it. But it's not a free-for-all. The reason it's not a free-for-all is that the key factor within fair use is that fourth factor, whether there's a market harm to the copyright holder. And the new 2017 bill actually spells that out further and more specifically and says substitution of the work in the market. So if you're using that same machine to make a copy of a video or a musical piece and reproduce it on the internet for others to use, that's still piracy in a fair use environment. So again, we have the largest entertainment industries as well as the largest technology industries. We haven't given everything away for free. But the reason countries are pushing this way is there's an increasing recognition that our legislatures, when they finish this bill, are not going to think of everything that's going to happen in the future that might make a reproduction or display or transmission or communication of a copyrighted work. And so if you want to create that space, fair use or openness is the answer. We've been doing a little bit of empirical research, and the submission that we've submitted to the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee is online, and you can find it at infojustice.org. But the upshot is this. We went through and studied about 25 different countries and looked at how open their copyright laws are getting over time on the exception side. And then we did a series of econometric studies to control for GDP per capita and firm size and these other things that account for profits. And what you find is that information firms, these kind of high technology firms we've been talking about, do better in countries with more open copyright environments controlled for other factors. So this hypothesis I've been telling you about, that one of the reasons technology does better in places with fair use, has some empirical support. But second, the creative industries also do better in countries with more open copyright systems. So that includes publishing, entertainment, music, etc. When you think about it, it's a little bit logic. These same industries need to use the same technologies that evolve over time and need to be enabled by copyright. These same industries, the filmmakers that we've been working with for so long, they quote materials in their films in order to tell stories. And if a copyright holder has the ability to say, you can't use my speech in your speech, then that enables a very specific kind of private censorship. And it's a private censorship that takes the value away from these new creators, and it can also impede their ability to express themselves. So these value conflicts that Mr. Nishishenze mentioned at the beginning, at the core of it is often free expression versus copyright, and we need a mechanism to mediate that. And an open textured fair use clause gives you the text that enables you to do it. And if you want evidence that it's not a peculiarly American concept, then I would refer you to Section 36 of your Constitution. The limitation clause of your Constitution, which turns on a 4-step test that looks almost exactly like fair use. It talks about what's the purpose of the action that's limiting that right. And is that action tailored to the purpose? And are you doing more than is necessary? And this is the same kind of concept, a general public interest exception, if you want to call it that. The group that I'm part of, which is academics, copyright academics from about 30 or 40 different countries around the world, not only from the US, civil law and common law, believe every copyright law should have, because it's in the public interest to do so. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.